Hello, and welcome to Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candice. This podcast is about healing the wounds that you can't see and leading a revolution against oppressive systems that keep them open. We're going to talk about really practical tools for managing complex PTSD, as well as dive into relevant current day topics that make healing a daily practice. You can follow us at IG at Open Wounds Podcast or watch on YouTube at Open Wounds Podcast. Please rate, review, like, subscribe, all the things, and enjoy this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. Today, I have with me a guest. His name is Davi. He is a political educator, and I wanted to have him on because I found him on Instagram. I think people were sharing his stuff during all this political chaos we've been experiencing, and I was like, oh, he knows a shit ton about communism, and I think I really want to talk to him more about this. So welcome to the podcast, Davi.
Hi, Candice, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here, having this conversation with you, and I hope that we can clarify lots of the misconceptions people have about socialism, communism, so you can give people more clarity of what society could be
Mhm.
um, after capitalism.
Yes. I think right now it's coming from a very idealistic place because we see all the problems, but it's like, oh, there's hope for the future. And there's a lot of people like my son is he's 21, he'll be 22 soon, and he has a very nihilistic belief of like we're all fucked. The earth is going to burn, like nothing good is going to come from this. We're all going to starve. There's not going to be any water. And so he's just kind of thrown his hands up in the air as to where I feel like I'm more like, no, we need to do something. We need to take action. We need to, rally together collectively. So I think the first thing I wanted to ask you about was like, because even with I had a bachelor's degree with a minor in sociology, and we talked about politics, but we focused very much on the US, which is a very two-party limited system. Like I was talking to my friend from Norway, and I'm like, you guys have like lots of parties. And she's like, oh yeah. And they kind of like some will win and some will lose. But um, we didn't learn much about socialism or communism, and the little bit we did was it was just like very lightly tapped on it, like Marxism and Leninism. And so I've been watching your videos and they're so dense, but can you just like for somebody who knows nothing explain what the difference is between socialism and communism, because I think people don't understand that there is a difference.
Yeah, sure. This is a very, very common question and a very important one because it's the foundation of the understanding. When you know what it is, actually, without the Red Scare, without the anti-communist propaganda,
Hmm.
without the Cold War
Yeah.
fun fiction we have, it's very important to understand this. First of all, Candice, I think the first step of that is understanding what capitalism really is.
Mm.
Because when you understand the system you are, you can understand what's the actual difference, right?
Yeah.
And and that's happened with Marx. Marx, he started studying capitalism, so
Mm.
he's a very deep knowledgeable about capitalism, right? And he has the three books, The Capital, which explains everything about capitalism, which for those who are watching and listening to us now, I strongly advise to read. But basically, capitalism is an economic political system that's based on the private property of the means of production. Right? So, what are means of production? Are lands, factories, resources, technology, transport, all the things that humans needs to survive, right?
Right.
Water, food. But the problem is, these means of production under capitalism, they are owned by a very tiny minority that we call the capitalists or the bourgeoisie or the super rich, right?
Right.
And when we talk about private property, we don't talk about your toothbrush or your car or your house. Those are personal property, things that
Mm.
you use. When we talk about private property of the means of production, we talk about things that produce wealth, right? That
Mm,
generate profit to someone, right? So your toothbrush, you don't generate profit with a toothbrush, right?
right,
So the problem is that these private properties, of the means of production, they are owned by a very tiny minority.
right.
The rest of the people, which we call as Marxists the working class or the proletariat, or the peasants, the only thing we own are our skills, our labor, our
Mm,
time, right? Because we don't own anything. So because the basic needs of humanity are owned and controlled by a very tiny minority of people, and we all need water, we all need food to
right.
survive, what we have to do, we have to sell our labor, we have to sell our time, we have to sell our skills in exchange of money so we can access those things, right?
Mm,
So capitalism develops around that. And of course, because of that, we're going to have layers and layers and layers of stuff that develops around that basic perspective, right? And the thing is, if I don't own a house, I have to work to be able to rent a house.
right,
If I don't own land, I have to work in order to buy food. If I
right,
don't own water or a river or a lake, I have to work in order to get money to buy water, right?
right.
So all the capitalist system is based on this exchange. People
Mm,
who owns the basic resources for human survival and those who doesn't. And
right,
those who doesn't have to work and sell themselves away so they can access those things, right?
right.
Okay, but here's the catch. Our our job, the value we create with our work doesn't come doesn't come to us completely, right? When you work for a business, for example, everything you produce as a wealth in capitalism doesn't get to you because the business owner, he gets a chunk as a
Right.
profit, right?
Mhm.
So we are working and we're not getting the full amount, the full value we create.
Right.
So wealth always goes upward because
Mhm.
think about that. We work, right? And at the end of the month, we get our salary. But the value we produce, our boss or the business owner or the rich, they already got a chunk as a profit, right?
Right.
Then you get the salary, but you don't own house or water or food or electricity. So you have to get one part of your salary and give to the billionaire landlord, and then to the billionaire food owner, and to the billionaire
Mm,
water producer and energy producer. So everything we own, all the money we get from our work doesn't stay with us because we
right.
have to use that to pay billionaires around so they can so we can survive, right?
Right.
So that's why Marx will call the wage system as a modern slavery because
Mm,
we have to work to buy shelter, to buy water, to buy food, to survive. If we
right.
don't work, we don't survive, right?
Right.
So if we stop working today, we don't get anything because we need money, right? Because we don't own things.
Right.
Um, good. So that's how capitalism works. Socialism offers us a um, a change or another way, right? So basically, socialism will work in a different perspective. So if in capitalism, the means of production are owned by a very tiny minority of people, under
Right.
socialism, the means of production are publicly owned.
Mm,
So water, food, housing, um, energy, transport, technology, media, they are accessible for everyone. So under socialism, we don't have to work to survive. We have to work to produce things to humanity,
mm.
right?
I think
So
that's where people get caught up because they think in socialism, the government owns all the resources, right? And so they don't trust the government, therefore they don't want the government owning it. That's where I'm getting like I'm like, "Oh, see there's a misconception I had because I understood it to be like, oh, in socialism, instead of the buses being run by Greyhound, they're run by your state or your county or your federal government. Or instead of the garbage man being privatized by a Pacific Waste and Management Company, it's your federal government paying the garbage man and paying for the garbage trucks. So can you explain why there is a misconception, why people think it's the government owning everything in socialism when that's not how it's actually intended to be?
No, actually is the government, but that's here's the catch. Under capitalism, the government has an owner. So under capitalism, the government is owned by the rich, right?
Okay.
So under capitalism, the government works to achieve or to meet the interests of the ruling class, which we call the rich, the bourgeoisie, the billionaires, right? So when the revolution happens and we overthrow capitalism, the state still exists, but now the working class takes the political and economic power of the bourgeoisie. So the
Mm,
state is run or is ran by the working class, which means that the government will or the state will work to meet the interests of the majority, not
mm,
of the minority. So, for example, I'll give an example. Let's imagine that we are under socialism, right?
right.
And there is a political discussion on the Congress um, to decide if the water company will be owned by someone or by the state or public owned. If the water company is owned by one person, this person will not run the water company to achieve the interests of the majority, because this person has um, one goal only, which is get the most amount of
Profit.
profit it
Yeah.
can, right? So when we have this difference, we understand why under socialism the state will run everything, but the state will run based on the interests of the majority, not to
Mm,
profit, but to achieve and to make sure that everyone has access to the water in that example, right?
okay.
So, for example, um, if the water company is owned by the state doesn't have as a main goal to profit, has the main goal to serve the people. So
Mm,
you to make sure that the prices are accessible and that the services are good, are in the high quality. If someone as an individual owns the water company, the main goal of this person is to profit.
right.
So they will do the opposite. They
Right.
will increase the prices and decrease the quality, because the goal is to profit, not to serve or to provide a good service. If that makes sense.
Right.
So under socialism, the state exists
So
under socialism,
do
but the owner of the state is not the rich, but the people.
it's the people. So do you have a good example of somewhere where that's actually being enacted in that way? Because I think that's the other part is people be like, well, in theory, this makes perfect sense. However, we don't see it like executed, right? Like um other countries might have like socialism light. Like parts of their system might be actually owned by the people and not privatized, but not the whole thing. So can you give an example of like where this is actually taking place and it's working?
Well, China is the main example we have today, right? Even though there is a massive discussion whether China is socialist or not, is capitalist or not, that's a whole other discussion. But for
Right.
example, in China, all the strategic sectors of the economy are owned by the state.
Hmm.
All of them, all of them: land, water, energy, transport, media, technology. All of them are owned by the state.
Okay.
And that's, Candice, makes all difference in the development of a country, right?
Right.
Because you can use the wealth the country produces to reinvest in the country. It
Mm,
doesn't go to the pockets of few, right?
right.
Because think think with me. If we have a transport company in the U.S. that's owned by a individual or a group of people, right? and they have shareholders that want to profit. And this transport company starts to get more and more profit. Those shareholders, they will not necessarily reinvest in the company.
Right.
They
Right.
will not necessarily reinvest in developing infrastructure of transport
Mhm.
because they want to profit, right?
Right.
That's their main goal. However, if this company, the same company, is owned by the people of the US, by the state, every money that gets into the business that goes above the costs gets reinvested in the business, gets
Mhm.
reinvested in improve infrastructure, gets reinvested in develop more rail trains, for example, right?
Right. Right.
So China does that very well. China does that very well. So BYD, for example, that's the car company that is getting into the US and everywhere in the world.
Mhm.
BYD is owned by the state, right?
Okay.
It's owned by the state. Um, everything else. So, China has social media, for example. Uh, for those who doesn't know, TikTok is not Chinese, right? But China has its own social media that only works in China, right? And
Mm.
they have completely control under the social media, right?
Right.
So, for example, China right now just started a policy that for you to talk about anything in social media in China, you have to prove that you know what you're talking about. You have to
Wow.
prove that you have knowledge. You have to prove that you have done a qualification, that you studied, that you have actually foundations to state whatever you are stating, right?
Mm.
To make those statements. Think about that in the US. How many people talk balonies in the US
Right.
without knowing anything what they're talking about, right?
Right.
How many anti-vax we have in the US spreading lies, right?
Right.
How much flat earth people, right,
Right.
are talking in the US? And you cannot talk about that in China because it's not true. It's a lie. It's fake
Right.
news, and you cannot influence people. So the state works to protect people
Mm.
from those lies, right?
Yeah, I
Which,
think
in my perspective, it's a good it's a good work of the state. People
right.
think, oh, this is authoritarian.
It's a
They are
repression of
prevent freedom
free
of
speech.
speech
Yeah.
and whatever. But for example,
Right.
I'm not in favor of completely freedom of speech. I don't think people should be allowed to talk about whatever they want.
Right. That comes
That's
up a
what happened
lot
in the
here
US.
in the States. It's like, is it hate speech? Is it free speech? Is it terrorism? Is it free speech? Is it inciting violence or is it free speech? And so we see this push pull where people will say horrendous things and be like, oh, it's free speech. I can say whatever the fuck I want. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing where people start to get like, oh, well, we don't want to be like China because China doesn't allow what you hear is if I lived in China and I was like thinking there was corruption in my government or thinking that my government was hiding, violence against its people or doing something that I wouldn't be able to stand outside with a sign and be like corruption, corruption, right? That I would get disappeared. So I think there's a lot of fear when we start talking about these things of people being like, well, if I give all my control to the state, then I lose my control, right? I lose this little, which truth be told, in the US, it's only perceived control. We don't actually have that much influence, right? We can riot, we can overthrow, we can do what Nepal's been doing and burn our government to the ground, but nobody really does that here. So it's like we think we have so much control when in an actuality, we really don't. They're just letting us play dirty, right? Like they're letting us be crazy and run amok all the while behind the scenes they're doing whatever they want and they're really not accountable to the people. So how is like
That's
in
the
go ahead.
no no that's the illusion of freedom under
Right.
capitalism, right? Capitalism gives us the illusion of freedom, right? Because we can choose among 27 flavors of bagels. We think we have freedom, right?
Right.
We can choose. We have 47 types of cars, so we think we have freedom. But you gave an example before we start in our conversation is that you only have two political parties to vote,
Right.
right? What kind of freedom is that?
Yeah.
For example, the majority of the US population is against sending money to Israel to fund the
Yeah.
genocide. And the
Exactly.
government keeps sending money to Israel to fund the
Mhm.
genocide.
Yeah.
So where is the power of the people? Where is the control? Right?
Right.
So
And
capitalism gives us the illusion to vote every 4 years to give that we are making a choice. However, the choice the game is rigged because the
it's two
both
sides
choices are the
of
same,
the same
right?
coin. Yeah. It's like
Yeah. I
that.
like to
Are
say, yeah,
you want heads or tails of the same quarter? You know,
I
I
like to
think
say
that
that in the US you have the Republicans, which is fascism,
right.
and you have the Democrats with fascism with a pride flag,
Right.
right?
It's
Doesn't
basically
change.
we're saying nice things to your face. My husband and I get into this about Obama because he's like, "Oh, I miss Obama," and I was like, "Obama was just polite. Obama was just more decorum. He was able to look nice and say nice things and keep his mouth shut. But what he did behind the scenes was no different than what we're seeing now." Because I was talking to a friend about this, um, and she goes, "Well, it's pointless. The whole government, like political system is pointless." And I was like, "Yeah, because we were told for decades that, oh, we can't do anything because we don't have control of the House and we don't have control of the Senate. And we need control of the Supreme Court, right?" So when Obama got in office, we had control of the House, we had control of the Senate, and we had control of the Supreme Court majority. Did he pass universal health care? No. Did he pass free college? No. Did he pass, did he codify a lot of these things like gay marriage or abortion? No, he didn't do jack shit. And he actually had us in war more than some of the other presidents, and he had people detained at the border in cages. And nobody wants to talk about how the Republicans and the Democrats are basically the same, being controlled by the same puppeteer, like you said, the billionaire class. We just are served a different flavor of ice cream, right? And so, um, not to derail what we were talking about, like how people perceive that they have freedom, but we have in America the why am I blanking out on it? The electoral college. And so when I learned about that, when I was like voting in my 20s, and I was like, wait a minute, the popular vote, this person should have won, but the electoral college went a different route. I was like, well, we're not even a democracy. This isn't a democracy. If every vote doesn't count, then why are we even voting, right? Like, it's a rigged system. So in some place like China, how are they electing officials? Can you talk about, like, in a true socialist system, how do we see it enacted where it doesn't become a dictatorship? Because I think that's what so many people see. They see Cuba, they see Russia, where these people get into office and then they won't leave, right? They die and then their son takes place. So you basically have like communism or socialism branding, but it's really more like a monarchy.
First of all, Candice, I think it's a very important we understand what a dictatorship means, right?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because what is a dictatorship? Basically, dictatorship is when one group of people impose its will on another group of people, right?
Mhm.
Basically, is that right? And sorry, under capitalism, dictatorship and democracy are both sides of the same coin,
Right,
right? Because let's think about that. Under capitalism, if dictatorship is the imposition of the will of a group to another group, the interests of from one group to another group, under capitalism, who has all the power? Who imposes all their agenda? Who who runs every sector toward their own interests, right?
right,
So in capitalism, we have that, right? We have that. We
right.
know we know that Elon Musk in the U.S. Let's use the U.S. as an example. We have Elon Musk, we have Jeff Bezos, we have the guy from
From Google.
Microsoft, right?
Yeah,
For the Google, we have all these billionaires, right? They have full access to the president. They
right.
have full access to the Senate. They have
Mhm.
full access to every congressman they want, right?
Right,
Do you have access to that, Candice?
No.
No. So if you want your will to be done, can you call to the president, hey, president, hey, Trump, I need help with that? You cannot.
No.
Elon Musk does that.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos does that, right?
Yeah.
So under capitalism, we have a group of people who imposes their will upon the people, right? Their
Right.
interests. You just said something really, really, really important. When Obama became president, people, oh, now we have a president that will rule the country for the people. He didn't, because he
No.
had owner, and his owner is not the people.
Right.
His owner are the billionaires who funded his campaign, right?
Yeah.
So in capitalism, we have one thing that's called lobby. And some people sometimes don't understand what lobby is, right?
Hmm.
Lobby, and more in the US, is way more evident because it's not criminalized, right? It's
Right.
actually encouraged, right?
Right.
Lobby is when a very rich person buys a congressman to vote a law that favors them.
Right.
So where's the democracy under capitalism in the US if the people vote to elect a president or a congressman or senator, right? And this senator will listen not to the people, but to the guy
Who
who
gave them
has
the
the
most
biggest
donations?
pockets, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of dictatorship and democracy, it's very important to understand that, because under capitalism we have a dictatorship. The dictatorship of the bourgeoisie,
Right.
the dictatorship of the rich, right?
Right.
Dictatorship of the wealthy, right? Cool. Under socialism, we also have a dictatorship, right? But the dictatorship of the proletariat,
Mm.
where the state will not will not um, will not listen to the rich to do what the rich want, but they will listen to the people, right?
So
So
in
yes,
socialism,
socialism is a dictatorship, but it's a dictatorship run by the people upon the very tiny minority of the rich.
I think the other thing too people say is like, well, if I lived in a socialist country, all my money's going to get taken away by taxes. And I saw something the other day that said one of the Norwegian countries has more billionaires per capita than the US does. So that's proving that no, that's not true. You can still make millions. But there is some type of cap to where, let's say I own a clothing manufacturing factory in China. I can't become a billionaire in China. Is that true or not? Like, can you become a billionaire under socialism? How does the government manage people who are profiting at a large scale, right?
China has the second. This, China is the country with the second highest number of billionaires in the world, right? It's only behind the US.
Mm.
Right? However, because and that's very important to explain. Socialism is not like a straight line of development, well, onwards and upwards, with full of rainbows and butterflies and
Right.
unicorns, right?
Yeah.
And even more when you are a socialist country in a world that's ruled by capitalism, you're going to have lots of sanctions and blockades and embargoes and military invasions and CIA backed coups, right?
Right.
So you have to go back and forth in history to, or in time, to maintain the revolution alive, right?
Mm.
So China uh, had had a decision back in the day, back in the 80s, to allow capitalism means of production or ways of production to evolve,
Mm.
but only so they can have a better infrastructure, so
Okay.
they can build socialism on this capitalist infrastructure. Because, Candice, that's very important to say as well, socialism, um, and that Marx and Engels and Lenin, all the historical philosopher of communism always said that socialism will grow on the ruins of capitalism. What that
Mm.
means? That capitalism creates the infrastructure where socialism will rise, right? Without capitalism, you cannot have socialism, right?
Okay, so
So capitalism is
let's
kind of a stepstone in
pause
history.
there because, like, let's say you're talking about a developing nation, which we used to call third world, or now they call them the global south. But let's take a country in Africa, for example, that doesn't have, you know, water waste management. They don't have highways. They don't have, like, you know, electricity running to every single town. You're saying, in theory, they could not just jump straight to socialism. They need to have capitalism first.
No, no, because socialism is a transition stage from capitalism toward
Okay.
communism, right? So socialism is nothing more than the lower phase of communism. Socialism
Okay.
is not a thing in itself, right?
Okay.
You cannot have socialism and stop there because socialism is a transition. It's a is a period after capitalism that the country, because let's think about that. And this
Yeah.
when the revolution happens, let's say that the U.S. has a social revolution tomorrow, right?
Right.
The day after the revolution, the country is still capitalist.
Yeah.
All these structures are capitalist, right? All the relationships of production, all the working relationship between companies and employees, everything is still capitalism.
Yeah.
The thing is that now the state belongs to the people, to the working class, right? In that moment, there is a very long transition to dismantle the capitalist ways of production to
Mm.
develop a socialist way of production until we achieve communism.
Okay, I see. So,
However,
like,
communism can never.
France and Germany and all these places where they've had revolution, they're still in that influx. They're like half capitalist, half socialist, right? Like, we see that with a lot of Europe where there are some aspects of socialism in place, but there's also still aspects of capitalism in place. They're not truly fully communist, but they're not truly fully, you know, capitalist either.
Actually, France, Germany, they are fully capitalists, right?
Oh, okay. So
Fully,
let's talk
fully.
about that because from America's standpoint, we're like, they have free college, they have free healthcare, they have free childcare, they have, they have all these support networks in place. So we see them as socialists, right? So why is it that they aren't true socialists?
So before that, we only have five socialist countries in the world, right? Only five. We have
Okay.
China, we have Vietnam, we have Cuba, we have North Korea, and we have Laos. So
Okay.
those are the only five socialist nations where the means of production, we spoke about that in the beginning, the
Are
means of
owned by
production
the
are
state.
publicly owned, right?
Okay.
True. So those are the only five. Now, we have to be very careful to not confuse socialism with a welfare state, right?
Okay. So
So
talk
two
about that.
different things. So what's a welfare state? Is a condition that a country, even if it's capitalist, to provide to its population a good safety net, right?
Mm,
Because they are rich. So if they are rich, they can provide to its population, even though the means of production and the state are still ruled by capitalism and by
mm,
capitalists, right? So they provide that to the population so they can soften their outrage or their will to
okay.
change,
It's like
right?
pacify them.
Pacify them. Exactly, exactly. That's what social democracy does, right? And in history, we see that all the time. So, for example, we always hear that the Scandinavian countries are socialists, right?
Right.
However, these countries that can provide this welfare state to its population, they can do that because they exploited brutally countries from the global south,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
So France had colonies, German had colonies, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, right? So all these countries, Denmark, all these countries, they had
Colonies to
colonies, and they
exploit.
exploit them. So they exploit, for example, um, where we always hear that, which one is the best, or where we can get the best chocolate in the world?
People think of Switzerland, but cocoa
Switzerland,
isn't
right?
even grown in Switzerland because it needs a tropical
Exactly.
climate.
came from Ivory Coast in Africa. That so Switzerland has the best chalk in the world. They don't have one
Yeah, they can't
um,
even grow the cocoa
cocoa
plant there
tree,
unless
right?
it's in a
So how
greenhouse.
so how is that? Right? How is that? How they can do that? Because they exploit from other countries, right?
Mhm.
So and normally the European countries, which has this capacity to provide the welfare state to its population, they can because they bring wealth, they bring resources from underdeveloped countries and very
Mm,
exploited countries,
right.
and they use this wealth to develop their nation, right?
Okay.
So there is not a single socialist country in Europe,
Wow.
not a single
Okay.
one, right? They are all capitalists.
They're all
They
capitals
all
with
survive from
welfare.
exploitation from global South countries. Right?
Okay. So, what about like I know because we're already talking for 45 minutes. I feel like we could go forever. But communism. So, you mentioned Cuba, and I recently had somebody on who had come from Cuba and they live in America now, and they said, when they were little, there was like a coupon book where these are the foods you're allowed to access. So, if you didn't have a child under the age of 8, you could not have milk in your house, right? And so part of me thinks, well, if I had to choose between a coupon book and being homeless and starving, I'm going to take the coupon book. But as an American, where, like you said, I can go to the grocery store and there's 17 types of bagels, I'm going to say that coupon book is repression, it's oppression, it's the state starving its people, blah, 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 blah. So when we're talking about there's such a broad spectrum of how this plays out and how people say, well, I don't want that because what I have, I perceive it to currently be better because I don't care that there's somebody down the street starving. I'm fine, right? So when we're talking about the differences between socialism and communism, we often say Cuba is communist, North Korea is communist. So can you explain why they are not true communists?
Because communism cannot be achieved in a single country or in a few countries in the world, right?
Mm,
Communism, by definition, is a moment in development of history of society where we don't have the class division, so we don't have the state as a institution of force to prevent that the oppressed class um, fights against the ruling class, right?
mm,
So so when we talk about communism, communism never existed in our human history because we cannot have communism in a world which capitalism is the mainstream political system, because
okay.
capitalism is imperialistic. Capitalism does not accept differences in political systems, right? So because communism is only will only be achieved when we don't have class divisions, and for
Mm,
that we don't need a state anymore.
mm,
While we have capitalism in the world, the state has to exist in a socialist country to protect the revolution from the capitalist imperialism.
okay.
So communism will only be achieved when the majority of the world is socialist, and we can um, we can end capitalism, and we don't have classes, so people don't have to fight for resources anymore.
Right,
Because
right,
but right now, Candice, the only reason the state exists in capitalism is to prevent that the poor fight against the rich and take all their stuff.
right,
That's the only
right.
reason, right?
Which is
The-
hilarious because we have Zuckerberg on Kauai, because I live in Hawaii, building a giant underground bunker. It's like $30 million or something he's
yeah.
invested in building this giant underground bunker. And there was a thing on NPR talking about how these billionaires are creating these underground bunkers. And I thought, aren't they living in such fear every single moment of their life that somebody's going to come and take away all these resources from them, right? So, like you're saying, that currently the capitalism and the state are there to protect the rich from us, right? And so what it sounds like when you're discussing communism is kind of like a utopia. Like there's no borders, there's no state, everybody gets along, everybody's sharing resources. Like like you said, it's never existed. And it sounds like from what you're describing, it is hundreds, if not thousands of years off in the future because we can't stop trying to kill each other every moment we're alive, right?
But that's very important, Candice. Why do people are trying to kill each other every moment, right? Because, and Marx explains that very well. Um, the material condition of a person dictates how this person will act, right? Stay
Hmm.
with me. If if I do have house, food, shelter, water, leisure, theater, fun, if
Hmm.
I have that, why do I need to get yours?
Right.
I don't, right? Now, if I have a family and my kids are starving and I cannot pay the rent, and I'm
Hmm.
working 3 jobs and I cannot provide to my family, well, the survival, um, my survival instinct will
Kicks in.
act,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's very important to understand, right? That's very important to understand because people normally say that, oh, communism will never work because people are too greedy, right? But people are too greedy because capitalism makes them greedy.
Right.
Because under capitalism, we are always pushed to accumulate because
Right.
we don't have anything. And
Right.
and we don't have any safety or security that we're gonna have this in the future, right? So
Yeah.
I got one question from a follower once that said, "Oh, Davi, I'm a communist, I'm a socialist, right? I believe in communism, but I do have my house and I do have other 3 houses that I bought for a security net. Is that is
Mm.
that is that contradictory?" I was like, look, in capitalism, it's not. Because in
Right.
capitalism, you have to surround yourself of safety nets because
Hmm.
you never know if your retirement will stay there when you retire,
Right.
if your job will stay there the next week, right? You never know. So you have to surround yourself of safety net to survive because the system, the
Hmm.
collective, the society, the humanity doesn't provide you with safety net. So you have to
Right.
fight for yourself, right? So that's why we always say that we're not against capitalism from a moral perspective, right?
Right.
Oh, I don't think that people are evil, because they're capitalists. No, no. Capitalism is a system that brings the worst that human being
Yeah.
has, right?
Yeah.
But if we have in a society where we have access to everything, where we don't have to fight to survive,
Hmm.
things will change. Of course, we always gonna have the really evil person, right? We're always gonna have these people that will be like doing evil things just because. The
Right.
psychopaths, the social. We're gonna always gonna have these people. But this will reduce in such a way that will be way easier to handle that, right? So, for example, in
Right.
China, the mortality rate by crimes by crime by any like murders are one of the lowest in the world, and the police
Mm.
doesn't use fire guns. The police officers in China do not use fire guns because they don't
Hmm.
need to, because people have access to everything, right?
Yeah.
Why are they gonna fight? Why they're gonna try to steal a phone if I have a phone, right?
Yeah.
Why do I have to
I
steal a
think
car if I have
because
a car?
we've been painted this picture of like these people in China forced into slave labor and that they can't leave the building and that their bed is in the same workshop and that they get 10 minutes to shower and they're fed noodles one time a day. So there's a lot of propaganda against China and that they mowed down their people in Tiananmen Square and that we hear a lot of rhetoric against it because people are afraid of us merging towards that. But I wanted to touch back on something. So it sounds like we're making this big cycle to almost return back to tribalism. Like, because when you look at indigenous peoples and tribalism, yes, they had wars and they had competition for land and resources, but within their tribes, it was what you're describing. Everyone shares resources, everyone supports each other, the land is shared, like it's
Everyone
communal.
works.
Right. Everything works together. They don't have a lot, but they aren't lacking for anything, if that makes sense. Nobody has 7 TVs, but you also have enough food and there's a doctor that will help you and you don't have to like sell your stuff to pay for the doctor. So it's funny to me because I feel like we've come so far, and in the end we will just end up right back where we started with, this kind of borderless,
So
classless state.
we do have something called the primitive communism, right?
Okay.
That's what the tribes used to do before, right? However, we have to be very careful, Candice, to say, oh, they didn't have much. No, they did have everything they need,
Right.
right? Because what happens is that capitalism creates the needs of things that we don't need,
Right.
right?
We don't need
Right?
a private jet. We just want one because it looks cool.
Exactly, right? We don't
Yeah.
we don't need cars.
Yeah.
Or at least we shouldn't need cars,
Right.
right? We don't need 5 pairs of shoes. Just need one,
Right.
right? We don't need 30 types of different t-shirts. Just need three or four when two are washing, right? In the other two, because capitalism survives under this artificial need that
Mm.
creates upon the people, and then you can bring about marketing, propaganda, and all this stuff that we are brainwashed since we are born, right?
Right.
However, when you think about not uh, the tribes, people didn't have much. No, they had everything,
They had
right?
everything they
And when I say
needed. Yeah.
everything they needed, exactly. So under socialism, we're gonna have everything we need because socialism is about abundance, not restriction.
Mm.
Capitalism is about restriction, not abundance, right?
Right.
So when you have like one thing about in the US, the richest country in the world, right? The land of the free, right? In 2024, the US had 750,000 homeless.
Mhm.
What? But is it the richest country in the world, right? Why its people doesn't have a house, right? In the US, 38 million people are under poverty line. But wait a second. Is it the richest people in the world? The richest country? In contrast, China, 93% of its population owns a house,
Mm.
right? The
Yeah.
7%, they're not homeless. They just don't own a house,
Right.
right? So, so when you bring about that, socialism and communism in the higher stage of socialism is about abundance. It's about everything having everything they want, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, people say, "Oh, you're a communist, but you have iPhone." Like this, no, this massive
Yeah.
line, right? Oh, how can you be a communist and have an iPhone? Because iPhone is a tool of society. It's
Yeah.
created by workers, exploited workers, who
Yeah.
created the phone, and the capitalists just put a $1,000 tag and sold to you, right?
Right.
Um, but socialism is about everyone who wants to have an iPhone could have.
Mhm.
Not about just a few tiny of people have an iPhone and sell this iPhone for $12,000
Right.
if you want to have one, right? So
Right.
so capitalists they give this they give capitalists gives us this illusion of possibilities when in fact we are as free as our bank account allows us to be.
Right.
Candice, do you think you are free
I
under
mean,
capitalism?
no, because like you said, uh, I had this discussion with someone the other day. I was like, to truly extract yourself from capitalism while living in capitalism, you would have to somehow buy land, live off grid, and grow your own food, grow your own meat, have your own chickens or whatever, have catchment water from rain and solar panels from rain, or solar panels so you have electricity or whatever, gas or whatnot. Um, that's the only way you can extract yourself from the system. And most people can't do that because, especially once you get older, your body physically cannot go out and garden and rake and hoe and put the weeds and all that stuff, right? So, in order to be free from all of this, and then if you're in the United States, that land you're living on, you still have to pay taxes to the state and the federal government, right? For what? What are they giving you in return for the taxes that
Pay
you pay?
taxes is not a problem, right? Pay tax is
Right.
not a problem. The problem is that you pay taxes, you don't get the return of what you pay for. So
Right.
you
I've
pay
always
taxes
said
to the
that. It's like,
government. Yeah.
yeah. We pay plenty of taxes. People think, oh, in Europe, they're taxed to death. Not really. We pay like 30% of our income to taxes, and our government takes that money and uses it in ways we don't agree with. Like you said, the genocide that's happening to the Palestinian people,
because the government
or,
has an owner.
right,
The
because,
government has an owner, right?
right.
Because what
And
happens is like if we pay taxes to the government and you have free healthcare, free education for our kids, a good road to drive our car, we have accessible of cheap food, not doesn't have to be free, but accessible, that our wages
clean
doesn't make,
water, clean
yeah,
air. Yeah.
right? The problem is that when we pay taxes to the government that's owned by capitalists, these taxes doesn't return to the people
No.
because the people doesn't have a say, right?
Right.
And the thing about freedom under capitalism is very important. It's a very common thing that I got asked, and I always tell people, "Do you think you're free under capitalism?" And capitalist people will say, "Yeah, I'm free." I say, "Cool. Can you get an airplane and go to Europe right now? Right now? Can you do that? Can you
No.
buy? Can you go? No. Why not? Because I don't have money. Because I have to work tomorrow, right? So
There's no
wait. So wait. So
flights.
wait.
Yeah.
So wait. Yeah. So wait. So you're not actually free, are you? No, yeah, I can go. Yeah, so go. Can you go now? No, because I have all these things around me. So
Mhm.
so in capitalism, the only truly free people are the rich.
Right.
Because first, they don't work, right?
Right.
They don't need to work. No, they
They've
do. They
created
just go to the
businesses.
company and
Yeah.
and give like a motivational speech to their employees, blah blah whatever,
Right.
and wake up at 4 a.m. and take a cold shower to say that, oh, that's the billionaire mindset or whatever. But the billionaires are the only truly free under capitalism because they don't work and they have money to do whatever they want with
Mhm.
whoever they want to go whatever they want,
Right.
right?
I
So
think that's
we're
the
not free
illusion.
because
Yeah.
I cannot go to Europe right now. I cannot. I have to work tomorrow. I have my clients. I have my patients. I
Yeah.
don't have money to do that, right? So capitalism gives us the illusion of freedom
Mhm.
when the truly free under capitalism are the billionaires, are the only
Yeah.
ones, right?
And this brings up a good point because somebody shared a video of this Romanian businesswoman. She came to America, I think in the 80s, early 90s, and she started an eyelash company where she puts eyelashes and eyebrows for the wealthy people in Los Angeles, right? So she's serving high end clients and she's charging them a lot of money for an extravagant luxury item. And she has become a billionaire. So people say, look, and she's sitting there on the video saying, I came from communism in Romania. I came from oppression. And now look at me. I'm a billionaire and you can do this too. And so I feel like that's why people are so misguided because they'll see these like Oprah or The Rock or this woman with the eyelash company. And they'll be like, yes, that's why America's the best because but it's truly an anomaly that she became a billionaire, right? And so I think that's the misconception is people think, oh, I could leave Cuba and I could come to America and I too could be a billionaire. Um, and they're also painting these places as bad and evil and repressive. And so can you talk a little bit about like why that's an inaccuracy and why that's not really like what we should be like leaning towards. We shouldn't be going forward with that thought process.
So it's impossible to become a billionaire ethically, right? It's impossible. It's impossible. It's a math problem, right? It's a math issue. It's impossible to become a billionaire ethically. And I'll give you some numbers, Candice. When you were born, you started to receive $1 per second in your bank account, right? You were born $1 per second in your bank account. You would achieve $1 million in 11 days. You would achieve $1 billion in 32 years, right?
Okay.
So $1 billion is $1 million times 1,000. Is 1,000 times 1 million, right? putting that in perspective, so people can understand this better. Candice, if you would make $20,000 a month, right?
Hmm.
And you manage to get a time machine and go back in time to the moment the pyramids of Egypt were being built,
Hmm.
and you manage to survive with $20,000 per month, right, without spending a single cent, by today, you would still be short of $1 billion.
Wow.
All right. So that's how it's impossible to make $1 billion from your own work.
Yes,
Right.
yes. That's
Let's
why
let's let's
people
be more
say
radical.
Taylor Swift's a ethical billionaire, and I was like, "But
It's not.
is she? Because
It's not.
she's probably selling merchandise that was made off of cheap labor in China, right? Like her T-shirts and her
Exactly.
bracelets and whatever." Yeah,
Exactly. And other musicians who plays for her in their concerts, how much money those guys get, right? But
right.
if we go even more radical, so people get the right picture, Candice. I'm sorry if I'm being too
No.
long in this answer, but let's imagine that by somehow you start to make $1 million a month, right? For some
Hmm.
reason, with your own word. I don't know. You
Right.
are very famous, whatever. $1 million per month. Without spending any cent, you would get 1 billion in 83 years,
Wow.
right? So
That that's crazy.
you would not get $1 billion in your lifetime, unless
No.
you are intending to live longer than any human has ever lived, because I'm talking about working time, not the
Right.
whole
Like
life,
when
right?
you're 18, you suddenly
Yeah.
magically are some kind of genius and you make something and start making $1 million a month. $1 million a month. You know what I mean? Most people can't fathom. There was an exercise I did at some training thing, and they were talking about, like, okay, and then you get this much money. And people started to freak out because they don't know what to do with that much money. Like your brain starts to be like, yeah, even if I bought a $10 million house, I've made that money in 10 months. Now what? Why would I still need to keep making $1 million every month after every month, unless you plan to do something philanthropic, which I think is where the rub comes, because people think, oh, if I was a billionaire, I would do good things with that money. I would build houses, or I would build schools, or I would build, hospitals, or I would help other people. But the truth of the matter is it shouldn't be on us as one person to care for the entire country. That should be what our tax dollars are for.
First of all, good people do not become billionaires, right? It's impossible to have a good people who becomes a billionaire. For that, for the reason I just explained, right? So, oh, if I was a billionaire, I would do that. You wouldn't, because you would not be a billionaire. Because people only become billionaires or stay as a billionaire if they have a mindset to be a billionaire and to stay as a billionaire,
Mm,
right? So for people who to become billionaire, they have to have this greed about accumulation that
mm,
they will not give away. The only reason they become billionaires is because they do not give away their things.
that's
They
true.
always have
Yeah.
this greeting perspective, right?
Yeah.
And then you can say, oh, but lots of billionaires, they have philanthropic works, they have institutions and foundations. This is called tax evasion,
Right. Yeah.
right?
I was
When you
talking to
create a
somebody about that
foundation,
the other day. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is just a way for them to control how the money is spent instead of it going to the federal government. So the Bill and Melinda Gates
exactly,
Foundation can pay themselves a salary, and they can pay their cousins, uncles, and best friends a salary, and then they can give money to the people they want to give money to and avoid paying all that money into the taxes.
exactly. So this charity they do is not because they're good people, it's because they're trying to maintain their
Yeah.
wealth, so they can stay as a billionaire. So um, being a billionaire or not is not a matter of morality, right? It's a matter of a system that allows someone to become a billionaire.
Hmm.
And that's why it's important that we change the system, because when we change the system, laws will also get changed, policies will also get changed, and
Right.
the state the socialist state will start to impose rules that
Yeah.
will prevent these people to accumulate this amount of money. So the problem is not the question is not like, oh, can I accumulate money under socialism? Yes, but not to the point to be a billionaire,
Right.
right?
Well, I
Because if
think too
the more you get, the more you're gonna get taxed. The more you
this
get, the more you're gonna give back to the society. Because as you
right.
said, no one needs $1 million salary. Why?
Yeah.
Why does someone need that? Right?
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to the point where you were saying instead of accumulation of wealth, there should be a reinvestment back into it. Like I always like Jeff Bezos is a perfect example with Amazon. He could be reinvesting back into his employees, and his employees could be, getting pensions, or his employees could be able to unionize and have, better working conditions. Like there was a meme that went out that said, they have to provide air conditioning in the warehouses that the robots work in because the robots will overheat and quit working, but the warehouses that the humans are in are not air conditioned. So he could take that money, reinvest it into his company, but instead he's keeping it, right? It's like it's coming to the top and it's staying at the top instead of being recycled back down. And I think that's another thing which I don't believe we can enact these common sense things that I think most people would agree on with the current political system we have, with the two-party system that exists in America, because they're never going to allow it, right? Because why would they? Why would they relinquish any sort of the power that they've already gained? So when we're
Yeah.
talking about,
When you
yeah,
allow when you allow in a democracy, in a bourgeois democracy, when you allowed money to rule, you will always get to that, right?
mhm,
Because we know that in a capitalist society, money talks, right? Money rules, money's power, right?
right,
So if I'm a billionaire and I have a system that helps me to stay as a billionaire and to accumulate more and more wealth, right? And I know that in a capitalist society, the media owners are capitalists and billionaires, right? And they shape how people think, right?
hmm
What am I going to do? I go, imagine that you are running for presidency, Candice, and I go to you and say, hey, Candice, I'm going to support you, right? I'm going to give you $2 billion so you can do whatever you want in your campaign, to hire people, to buy media, to appear whatever, to buy
hmm
billboards and whatever. However, when if you win, you're going to do what I
what I
want.
say, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you say no, he says, okay. He goes to the other and said, look, I'm going to give you $2 billion. And that's a very important statistic that I always like to say, that over the past decades in the US, in 90% of the elections, the candidate with the biggest campaign fund won,
yeah,
right? That's not by accident.
right.
In the US, over the past decades, 90% of the candidates who had the biggest campaign fund, they won the elections,
Well, and
right?
that I mean, I know we're getting because I gotta leave in like 15 minutes to go to work. But that brings up a good point because like we were talking about the two-party system. For me, for example, I have not wanted to vote for either candidate in like the last 6 elections, right? What we saw the Democrats do to Bernie Sanders, who had the popular vote of the people, he had the will of the people, where they brought in Hillary, who nobody wanted, and threw and pushed Bernie out. So I was like, oh, this whole system is rigged. Like, why would I want to vote for either of you? Like, both of you are,
You guys
yeah.
do
So
have other party. You have PSL,
we have
right?
the Green Party, we have the Libertarians, we have
Yeah.
Independents, we have the Communist Party. But those people, like I said before we started recording, in the state of Oklahoma, you're not allowed to have a third party candidate on the ballot. It's only Republicans or Democrats. And
Well, because
even
are those who get the most votes before the election, right?
No, the state has passed a law prohibiting any
Oh my God,
third
it's
party
even worse than I was
candidate.
thought.
Yes, any third party candidate will never get on the bill. You would have to go to the Oklahoma State Senate and get them to change the law. In Hawaii, where I live, which we are very blue leaning, like our ballots sometimes don't even have any Republicans running. We do have third party candidates who will win smaller things like Senate seats or Congress seats or county council. But we still have to get a petition filled by so many people to get ballot access. And so I have been helping with the Green Party to get ballot access, like, hey, will you sign these petitions so we can get ballot access? But
That's called electorate barrier,
right,
barrier, right?
exactly.
Help me
So
that.
we
Yeah.
have systems in place to prohibit us from ever changing the structure. Like, it's like you try to think, okay, well, we need term limits. Well, how do we change the term limits? The people who currently are not being limited have to vote against themselves. Why would they do that? Why
So
would they
that's not a
ever?
democracy.
Yeah,
That's not a
exactly.
democracy, right?
Right,
Because the always the options you have are the options who will serve the same master.
right,
They'll serve the
exactly.
same master. So it doesn't change if Republicans, Democrats, people in the US think Democrats are lefts. Come
They're
on.
not leftists.
They
No,
are less right, right? They are
that's
like
what
not as
I've
right as Republicans,
said
right?
since Obama. I said the left's problem is they're not left. That's why people are disenfranchised, why they're not politically involved, why they're not active, because
But that's
they're
a
actually
project
not.
because the less people are interested in politics, the better for the ruling class.
Yeah,
Because if you think as an individual, say, oh, you know what, this system is all rigged. There is nothing we can do. Let's try to live our lives the best way we can. Which
yeah,
is a very genuine and legitimate way of
yeah,
thinking, right? I don't blame people who think like that. However, the more people think about like that, the better for the ruling class because
yeah.
they can do whatever they want. The people will
Unchecked.
not question. They'll have, whatever. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't have a say, right? So that's why it's so important to educate people politically because
Hmm.
because people not being politically educated, Candice, under capitalism is a project. It's
Yeah.
not by accident, right?
Hmm.
People, the ruling class, the government, which is ruled by the ruling class, by the rich, they do not invest in education. They do not invest in political education. They do not invest in society understanding. They do
Right.
not want that because when the people and history tells her that when the people start to say, wait, why am I working my ass off and getting poor every year
Yeah.
and that guy is getting richer every year. Go wait. And then the guy will read a book from, doesn't have to be a Marx. Go read Richard Wolff. You know, that's amazing. Understanding socialism. Richard Wolff is a Marxian economist from the U.S. I don't know if you
Hmm.
if you know him. Um, it's a great book to understand socialism, right? And the book
Yeah.
calls Understanding Socialism, right? So when the working class starts saying, wait, this is not right, and that's why the system wants us working our ass off, wants us to not having time to read, to leisure, to go
Right.
to theater, to consume culture. Because when we do that, our mind expand. When the mind expand, people say, whoa. People start to question, and
Right.
questioning is bad for capitalism.
Yeah. So I think so. Let's wrap it up on if we're I feel like starting to go on the precipice of the United States democracy, like whatever the system we currently are in is starting to collapse, right? So when we look at history, when this has happened before in other countries where this capitalist system can no longer function because people are saying, I can't live like this anymore, this is pointless, and people start to revolt, what happens next? Like, what is the next phase of our evolution that we can look forward to? Because I think that gives people hope. And like, that's the tipping point right now. People are either falling into hopeless, nihilistic, it doesn't matter, nothing I do matters, or they're angry and they want to do something about it. So, what's the next phase post capitalism?
So the post-capitalist phase is socialism, right? That's what I believe. That's what our us communists believe. And for people that are angry and want to do something, they should look for socialists and communists organizations or parties or social movements, right? In the US, you have the ACP, right? The American Communist Party. You have the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party. You have the PSL, right? You have the SRA with the Socialist Rifle Association, right? So you have a few options in the US to join, so you can start to organize, right?
Mm.
Because we the people, Candice, we don't have money, right? We don't have the hegemony on the violence that the state has with the ICE and the police and the military. We don't have that,
Right.
right? The only thing we have is the truth and our community,
Yeah.
right? And we see that over the past century in the world, all the movements that got successful or that succeed with their agenda were those movements who got together and fought together for change, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because right now, and even more with the climate collapse happening more and more, we have two options. We either overthrow capitalism or we go extinct,
Right.
right? Because climate collapse is getting worse and worse. And we have the COP30 in Brazil right now, which is for me, is a complete theater that doesn't change anything, right?
Hmm.
Um, but we can talk about that in the other episode because we don't
Yeah.
have time more. But like people need to organize and organize doesn't you don't have to join a communist party right now, right? You can organize with the people in your neighbor, right? You can
Hmm.
organize with people in your workplace, right? You can guess, hey guys, let's talk about how to improve our condition in my workplace, right? Look, we have this aircon that doesn't work for 3 weeks. Let's get together and let's fix that together. Yeah, let's do that. Or man, look, that manager is like cherry picking people because they have a favorite thing, right? So let's get together. Let's solve that together as a group
Hmm.
of people. So you have to start to create these small groups of people that are committed for changing, and
Hmm.
from that you start to build bigger and bigger movements. Because every movement, every revolutionary movement in history, it started with two people saying, "Look, I'm unhappy, and you, yeah, I'm unhappy too. It's cool. So let's talk about that."
Right.
That's how it worked, right? That's how Marx and Engels became the biggest communist philosopher back in the day. They said, "Look, this is wrong. Yeah, I think
Right.
so too. Let's talk about that. How do we change that?" Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important for you to understand that alone you don't do anything. If you are angry alone, you won't change anything. You're just gonna stay angry,
Right.
right? But the system wants you to think that you are alone, that no one else think like you, and
Right.
that's a lie.
Right.
There are millions of people in the world that are doing this fight that we are doing now. And if you go online and you try to find these people, if you go in your town and try to find these people, you will find them because we are everywhere. We're still a small amount of people, but we are growing, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully this is going to get bigger and bigger, so we can create some structural changes in our society, and people can actually finally be truly free and have a dignity, a life with dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. So since we're out of time, can you tell everybody where to find you? Because you have your your Instagram is dense, like it's a doctoral thesis. So if they want to come and watch your videos or they want to go on your website, um, can you share with everybody watching and listening how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram account and a TikTok account, and now a new YouTube channel. They all have the same name, is Your Communist Friend, because I am the communist friend of my friends. That's why I came up with this name, because I'm the only communist in my group of friends. So I'm
Yeah.
your communist friend. So if you go there, send me a hi, send me a message, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. I always try to answer everyone's questions, even though I get lots of questions every day. I try to answer all of them because I feel that's important to maintain this revolutionary wheel of people who want to know more and more.
Yeah.
So it would be great to have everyone following me on my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube channel, Your Communist Friend.
Yes, perfect. And I'll put all those links in the show notes, and I'll probably try to link some of the books he was talking about too if people want to read. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And hopefully, we'll have you back on again once we see, because I think we're at the beginning stages of our country changing, and I know we're going to have lots more to talk about as we see things has come to light within our countries, and not just in the United States. We didn't even get to talk about globally how this is, we're seeing the fascism rise globally all across the westernized nations. So yeah, I definitely want to have you come back again in the future and talk some more about this, because there's a lots to digest for everybody. So thank you so much, Davi, for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you back again next time.